Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Fantasy Live Show. Kendall, Valenzuela here, and it is the best time of the year. You've got the NFL Combine, and who better to break it down than with Thor, Nystrom, the one and only. Thor, how you doing? How's it going?
I'm doing great. It's NFL Combine week, Kendall. We have made it. I'm doing great.
We've made it. It is Thor Thursday, so let's get into it. Thor Thursdays presented by DraftKings here, Thor, and you said it. I mean, it's one of the best times of the year. What's your favorite part before we dive into all the news notes that everyone needs to know? Favorite part about going to the NFL Combine? What are you most looking forward to?
Gathering information, and that comes in all forms, right? Like you get it at the podium sessions, you get it bumping into people on the street, you get it later when you're out going to dinner and out later on. There is a lot of information there. It's like a fire hose, so you just try to catch as much as you can.
I love it. Well, let's get into some of the news before we go through some of the players whose stocks can rise, whose stock can fall. Let's talk about the players not testing at the Combine and what that means in your mind. Let's start with, I think the best place to start is with the quarterbacks. So you've got Shedeur Sanders, quarterback out of Colorado, and then you also have Cam Ward, quarterback out of Miami. We can start with Sanders and just your overall thoughts on both of these quarterbacks, not testing this week.
To me, this is a non-story. I know, it has become a story in the media, particularly with Shedeur. People didn't like that he pulled out of the Shrine game, after doing the interviews or whatever. And there was this talk of now he's going to force people to go to Colorado. And maybe it forces them to watch his film. I put this out on Twitter, but if you want an arm strength competition, if you want a placement competition, you want an accuracy competition, turn on the tape of these guys. We have years of film on each of these guys. Throwing in your shorts to uncovered receivers running down the field, it just doesn't move the needle for me personally as far as an evaluation goes, because we have seen it in pads with the bullets flying, having to make the decisions and then making the throws under duress and everything like that. So it's a non-story for me as far as that goes.
Is it the same with Cam Ward? Because usually these top quarterbacks don't throw. They want the better environment, right, Thor? When they say, come to my pro day, like I'm gonna throw it there. I know what's around me. I mean, top quarterbacks last year, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, they didn't throw in Indy. So is it the same for you with Cam Ward?
It is, yeah. I mean, if you have a lead in, it's like in poker when you have most of the chips, you're not going to play as aggressive as the guy who has the smallest stack of chips, right? Well, Cam Ward has the biggest stack of chips right now amongst the quarterback prospects, seeing as though he is the odds-on favorite to be the first quarterback taken. So why would you then throw? Right? Like all you can do is lose at that point. You're already in pole position. Someone's going to have to challenge him for that, or, the tide will have to change a bit on that for him to have to get more aggressive during his process. But obviously heading into the Combine, it is what it is. So he's going to sit it out. And that is the correct decision. That is what I would have informed Cam Ward, or what I would have advised him if I were his agent.
And then another player that we will not see is Ashton Jeanty as well. Just kind of announced that a few days ago. But Boise State, obviously star running back that we've talked about a lot here, will not participate in on-field workouts. And that's going to be those are Saturdays. So what are your thoughts on that one? Is it kind of the same thing here, Thor? Are these all non-stories, or does this one make a little bit of a difference for you?
No, I mean, it's in the same line in that Ashton Jeanty is the consensus RB1. What I'm interested in is heading into Boise's pro day. There has become more chatter of Ashton of like, oh, the NFL sees running back X similar to Ashton Jeanty. The one today was, I think it was Mel Kiper was saying he had Omari and Hampton mock 12th to the Cowboys, and he was like, oh, people I've talked to in the NFL have Omari and Hampton closer to Ashton Jeanty than is commonly believed. I'm curious if a guy like Omari and Hampton goes to the NFL Combine and dominates, or Kaleb Johnson goes to the Combine and dominates, even Travion Henderson. Will the separation then, will it become close enough that Ashton Jeanty feels that he has to do a full complement of tests at Boise State's pro day? I think that's the interesting thing. We could get testing metrics on him then. Whereas if that gap does not close, there's no way Ashton Jeanty is going to athletically test it at Boise State's pro day. He'll go through the drills, but again, you would just be putting stuff at risk that you don't have to. So we'll just have to see how that goes with the other testing of the running backs that are right behind him at the Combine.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I mean, we're talking about that for the quarterbacks too. I mean, they've got a lot that they can prove this week as well. So the last guy that's not testing too, we got to mention Abdul Carter out of Penn State. This was one I think you had mentioned before that maybe you didn't think that he was going to, that he was going to be able to do that. But what was your takeaway on this one as well?
Yeah, Abdul Carter, they say that he's still rehabbing from his shoulder injury. Yeah. And so, that's why he's just going to do the medicals and the interviews. Maybe. Right. I mean, and who knows, maybe, after the season that cut into his 40 training, whatever. But if Abdul Carter was fully healthy, would he have gone through the full complement of tests? It's the same thing for him, right? You were standing in pole position. There were people mocking you first overall. Now there's no mock draft out there where you are lower than fourth. So if you're Abdul Carter, why would you go out there again and put stuff up for risk when you have that big stack at the table right now? So whether the stuff about the shoulder injury and the rehab off of that, whether that's true or not, he wasn't going to be testing at this event anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, recovering from the shoulder injury he suffered in Penn State's playoff win over Boise State. Then he later played through that during the Orange Bowl. People have to remember that as well in that loss against Notre Dame. So something to look out for there. Yeah,
with
literally. Thor, What are we doing? It's just like people have to remember that. That wasn't that long ago either. So those are the guys that you will probably not see this weekend, but just something to keep an eye on. But I think it's good, Thor, that I'm glad you said it. It's just some of these are just non-stories. I know people want it to be a story, especially for the quarterbacks, but we usually don't see those guys going out there. So just remember that in the back of your mind when you see them on the screen this weekend. So speaking of quarterbacks, though, Thor, let's start here. And quarterbacks with the most on the line. And I think the one guy I know that we've talked about from the Senior Bowl all the way up until now, it has to be Jalen Milroe, right? He has to go out there because your takeaways from the Senior Bowl was they weren't good. It wasn't something where he went in and dominated that weekend and his stock rose. It was something where he was almost neutral or it got a little bit bad. So what are your expectations right now with Jalen Milroe? What can he do to be better going into the draft?
It has been a wild ride with Jalen Milroe, right? Like in 2022, his offensive coordinator was suggesting to him, you should move to running back. That's Bill O'Brien, and Jalen Milroe has brought that up numerous times since 2023. He gets benched for a full game. He was struggling week 2. Then they bench him for the full game at USF. Then he comes back into the starting lineup and was so good the rest of the season that he was in the Heisman discussion. This year, in 2024, now you're playing for Kalen DeBoer. First month of the season, Jalen Milroe might have been the best player in college football. He had a 10-1 TDI and T rate. At the end of September, he absolutely lit up Georgia in a way that you don't see other quarterbacks light up a Kirby Smart defense. Like it was something different. Alabama was 4-0 after that win. And Jalen Milroe looked like a top 5 pick. After that, down the stretch of the season, Jalen Milroe was terrible. The last 9 games of the season, he had a 6-10 TDI and T rate. Alabama goes 5-4. Then you go into the pre-draft process and you badly struggled in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. So it's like you have sort of these disparate things. Jalen Milroe certainly is the most physically gifted quarterback in this class. Ludicrous athleticism, and that's why this event is for him. And it sounds like he is going to do everything. He's already publicly come out and announced the throwing session. I think we're going to see him athletically. We better see him athletically test because that is where he is going to shine. Expecting 4.3 speed at 220 pounds and a vertical jump that is going to be around 40 inches. So this is his time to turn around the narrative that ever since the end of September has gone the wrong way for him. And the guy that I bring up, Kendall, Jalen Milroe's hero is Jalen Hurts. They both came from Texas. They were both 4-star dual threats. They both chose Alabama. Jalen Hurts heading into his NFL combine, and I think it was 2020, whenever that was. Jalen Hurts was viewed as an early day 3 pick. He was not far away from where Jalen Milroe is considered right now. Hurts had a good combine, of course. That sort of reversed the narrative on him a bit. He ended up getting taken late second round by the Eagles. Milroe is trying to do the same thing here, and he's going to have a better showing at the combine. So where could that end up? But it's obviously big for him considering how he played down the stretch and then at the Senior Bowl.
Well, yeah, because you said at the Senior Bowl too, it was, and when people are going to look and watch this weekend and what drills you're going to watch specifically, but you said his accuracy was so bad at the Senior Bowl, and it was
Yeah.
something that really hurt him in that way, and that he was late to make decisions. He put the ball kind of in harm's way every chance that he could. So now going into this weekend, you now have a chance where, like you said, you can run in the, I think you said the 4.3s. He's 220. So we're going to see how athletic he is. But right now, where do you put him going into the NFL Combine? Like day 3, like Malik Willis, I think that's when he went. Is that kind of where his range is right now?
Yeah, well, Malik Willis went near the end of round 3, and I think probably that's where you would have Milroe right now. He's QB4 on my board. You know, I would have Jackson Dart as a like top half of the second round guy, and then Milroe somewhere there in the third round. But yeah, QB4 on my board. But this event is made for Jalen Milroe. What Jalen Milroe is the assassin at, it's the deep ball stuff. He has a tremendous arm. It's like this twisty, elastic slingshot arm. He was a killer downfield in college, and then the athleticism thing he struggles with. Kendall, to your point, that was the thing where there was a spotlight on him at the Senior Bowl. Stuff like the timing concepts or throwing over the intermediate range, and of course there you're learning new plays, you're learning, you're meeting the receivers that you're working with. It turned out to be a very bad scenario for Jalen Milroe, who struggled short and intermediate in college. So yeah, but now you go to the NFL Combine where it's your athleticism and your arm talent. He's going to shine. People, get your popcorn ready for the throwing session, because Jalen Milroe is going to be letting it fly. And I think after that, you're going to come out with, there's going to be a ton of buzz for Jalen Milroe.
Is that the event you have circled on your calendar? You know, like date and time, like that's the one you're most excited to see from him? Or is there like a sneaky kind of event where you're like, actually his stock could raise a lot more if he does this?
Well, the 40 is the other one with Milroe, because I mean, if where in those am I right? Is he going to run the 4.3s, and then where in the 4.3s, and at that physical size, 220 to 225, he is going to wow people, and then the jumps as well are expected to be insane at that size. So you do that, then you go to your throwing session, and you're flinging the ball 75 yards downfield. That's how you reverse a narrative. Now, it has been a rough 4 months or so for Jalen Milroe, but we have seen those high-end flashes, and we saw him over a sustained period. He was tremendous down the stretch in 2003. And if it had Michigan not stopped them in the playoff, recall that game went to overtime, and then Michigan ended up stuffing Milroe on the fourth down. But Alabama, whoever won that game was going to beat Washington in the national title game. So that was Milroe in 2023. And again, he started off 2024 great. I think it was a bad fit with Kalen DeBoer there. But this event here, you're going to juice all of your strengths, and you're not going to see as many of his weaknesses. That's the stuff we've seen at the Senior Bowl.
Let's go over to a couple running backs who you think can help their stock going into this NFL Combine. Let's start off with Kaleb Johnson out of Iowa and what you see from him. Big running back, right? He's 6 foot, 225. Said, you've told me before, he runs extremely hard as well. So what are your, I don't know honestly about expectations, but what do you want to see from Kaleb Johnson that will make the chatter kind of go up for him?
Yeah, Kaleb Johnson right now is RB4 on the media's consensus board. And I think the reason that he is not higher, that he is not talked about in the same neighborhood as Omari and Hampton, is there is this assumption out there that he is like 4.55, 40 or above. Some people on Twitter say, oh, he's a 4.6s guy. I think Kaleb Johnson's going to run in the 4.4s, and I think that there's a good shot that it is going to be in the low 4.4s, and that is going to stun people. People expect that from Omari and Hampton, but for whatever reason, they don't with Kaleb Johnson. And the thing that I would forward, my theory for that, is because we saw Omari and Hampton the years before that. Evaluators already had a lot of exposure to Omari and Hampton because, of course, the process before, whose film were they watching? Drake May's, right? So you saw plenty of the UNC offense. You had exposure there. Whereas Kaleb Johnson, 2023, he was sort of on again, off again. He was injured for a little bit. They didn't play him in one game. It was 2024 where he had the crazy breakout. Iowa got a new offensive coordinator. Their old offensive coordinator, Kirk Ferentz's son, Brian, was kind of dippy. They bring in Tim Lester this year, and they do the full zone run scheme. They fleshed the whole thing out. They added mid-zone to it. So it was analogous to like the 49ers or what the Rams or the Packers do. Their sort of zone running scheme. Caleb Johnson went absolutely ballistic, and we got to see high-end speed from him. You do not typically see from a 225-pound back. His breakaway percentile, 90th percentile PFF. And then he was clocked at over 22 miles per hour on the GPS. Speaking to the long speed thing, when that kid gets into the third level, he is a threat to take it to the house. You're not catching Caleb Johnson from behind. So I think his speed is being criminally underrated, particularly in the context of his size. And if he runs like I think he will, it's going to be a rocket ship up for Caleb Johnson's stock.
Oh, okay. Because I know that you've written before and said like some of his runs look like Le'Veon Bell, where he's just kind of waiting and waiting and waiting, and then all of a sudden you see him explode. And then you look at the PFF stats, like you just said, 94th percentile in yards after contact per attempt, and you can see that like the end of his runs as well, like you've talked about, are just violent. Like you can see him just wait and then he just goes. So that's the one thing that I'm excited to watch. And for you to like tell us on Twitter, again, if people aren't following you at ThorKU on Twitter for this week, you have to be. Those are the two things that I'm most excited about, because those are the ones that you've talked about a lot as well with him.
Yeah, he is a zone runner, and we now have the evidence that he is really good at each of the concepts. The inside zone, like the hole puncher thing, he had one of the best yards per carry numbers in the NCAA between the left guard and the right guard. He's really good in there. He's sudden forward, and then his footwork is really, really good. He's like light and bouncy on the inside, so it's really hard to sort of square him up, and you're not getting him down on first contact. He'll run through anything like that. And then the outside zone is what you're talking about, Kendall, the Le'Veon Bell stuff, where you're sort of picking down the line. He does a really this is Le'Veon-esque, where Le'Veon, one of the brilliant things he did, it was sucking down the second level defenders and forcing them to make the decision before he did. What gap you're going to go in, what gap you're going to go in. Once they declared, he's like, bye-bye, right? Like, and now they're caught up in human wreckage. He can pick another door, and then the explode thing out. Caleb Johnson, you're able to access that long speed that we're talking about because of this, because he is so good at manipulating second level defenders, because he has that vision and the patience picking down the line in those outside wide zone type concepts, and because you're not getting him down on an off angle shot. The first guy is not getting him down. That's how he gets out there into the second level, and from there, that's where he builds up to a very, very good high-end speed.
And he did show flashes in the receiving game as well, right? Only had 2 drops, 22 receptions on 25 targets. So that was also something that kind of stuck out when we're talking, fantasy players love to talk about that. But if he does have a little receiving to his game, that could level him up as well.
Yeah, he is similar in this regard, I think, to Omarion Hampton, and he probably doesn't get that same kind of credit. They both ran the same kind of routes, which really weren't routes at all. Neither of them were deployed down the field. It was screens, it was swings, and it was checkdowns right behind the line of scrimmage. And then you basically try to get, when it's not a checkdown, one of the first couple, you try to get a convoy in front of him, both of those guys, and then you just get them out into space. Neither Omarion Hampton nor Caleb Johnson are going to be doing the thing of, running up the field and 8 yards up, they're jutting out, and doing a diagonal route. They're not doing stuff down the field. It is getting them out into space where they are impossible to tackle one-on-one. And if you get some blockers behind them, that's where you can see explosive plays in the passing game. So both those guys are value adds to passing offenses. But again, keep in mind the usage, like how you need to use those guys and how they can bring value to your passing offense.
So for the next, hour, maybe we could go for 4 hours and talk Cam Skattebo here, because
Good.
You did put him in the rundown for us. So I thank you so much.
That was for you, Kendall.
Because, we're just here to talk about Cam Skattebo going to the Minnesota Vikings here. But it is really, the only Arizona State player going to the Combine this year, and one that, he could. I've seen him a lot in these articles, Thor, where it's like could improve his draft stock, and it feels like a lot needs to go right for Skattebo to do this weekend. But what do you think that he's going to bring to the Combine?
Yeah, I mean, you know how spectacular Skattebo was last year on the field. It speaks for itself, and you can't measure heart at the NFL Combine. What they can do is measure the other stuff, and he needs to be just good enough, right? He needs to not fall on his face in the testing, and I'm very curious to see if Cam Skattebo runs the 40. We all want to see it because we are very curious to see what his high-end speed is. The thing that I have zero question about, it's his agility. You see that in the close quarters. I mean, he's the street fighter guy for sure, but he makes it difficult for the defender even before they get into the fight, post contact, right? Like with that sort of side to side and the footwork and the quick cuts, the angle changes with Cam Skattebo. I have no concerns about his agility whatsoever. And his burst as well. So I think he will jump pretty well as well. But the high end speed is what people are curious about. Will he test there? That remains to be seen. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, a big NFL combine for Cam Skattebo coming up in this enormously stacked running back class, potentially historically stacked running back class. In terms of the depth, there is big time jockeying going on after Genty, and then after the next four is what is sort of the agreed upon second tier. Kaleb Johnson, the two Ohio State kids, and Omari and Hampton. Behind that, there is enormous jockeying going on. We will have a much better picture post combine, post Saturdays when the running backs run and test than we do right now. But yeah, Cam Skattebo, big decisions coming up and a big week coming up.
I'm nervous about it. I'm nervous about the 40. That's just the one thing, like you said, that's the one thing that we have to watch out for and see what he does there. But we've talked about it too. He's got strength, he's got power, he's got balance, he's got the body control, everything that you've seen when you say turn on the tape, that's what you see. So for me, where do you have him? Is he a day 3 for you right now? Is it just stock neutral before the NFL combine, or is he someone that you think could sneak into the day 2?
I think he will go in day 2 unless he falls on his face in testing. And where I have him right now is round 3. I think that's probably where Cam Skattebo is going, barring the testing being real bad. And in that case, we would have to see. However, the guy that I comp up to, Kendall, interestingly enough, remember David Montgomery coming out of Iowa State?
Ooh, okay.
David Montgomery is a little bit taller. So, grant you that he's a couple inches taller, but Skattebo is more sort of bricked up. Like coming out Montgomery was 222. Skattebo is 2 inches shorter, and he is right around that weight. We're waiting for Skattebo's weigh-in, but he is going to be right around there. This is like an all-time bowling ball type build, right? Like everything just got compacted down. David Montgomery in his NFL combine, it was the same thing where it was like the side-to-side thing and then the power and the breaking tackles. I remember David Montgomery at Iowa State. He was just flinging people off of, and then he'll make someone mad, so he's flinging someone else off him. It's just like Skattebo. But Montgomery at his combine, 4.6340. That was 26th percentile. Vertical jump, 28.5. That was the first percentile. The 1th percentile was David Montgomery's vertical. He did a little bit better in the broad jump, 68th. But the whole point I'm trying to make is Cam Skattebo should test better than David Montgomery. And Kendall, David Montgomery's had an okay NFL career, hasn't he?
Yeah, that'd be okay. That'd be okay with me. I've seen recently, and I don't know if it's the Arizona thing, but I've seen a few people comp him to James Conner. Regardless, though, everything that I've seen too is that, depending on how he does this weekend, it's kind of like how he's built and what kind of system he could be like featured in this downhill system. Maybe he can tell people that, yeah, I can fit as a primary back as a professional in the NFL. That's the one thing, Thor. That's just what we need. So we can buy the jerseys and I can wear them every Sunday. That's all I need.
Yeah. The only thing with the Connor is 6'1", so it's like the angular power back, and whereas Skattebo, he might be under 5'8". We'll have to see when we go in there, and it's more of that side to side thing, So like that's why I prefer the Montgomery thing. And Montgomery too, he had the receiving ability coming out of Iowa State. The similar thing, as you know, Kendall, the world's biggest Arizona State fan, where they would also punt him with targets as a receiver and then let him do his thing in the open field.
Yeah, our short king. That's who we're going to be cheering for. I need you to talk to him this weekend. I need you to just say hi for me. Anything that you can do. That's what I need this weekend. Before. Well,
I was going to ask you, Kendall. Do you have any questions that I should drop for Skattebo? I want to give you the opportunity.
No, my question is just, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's the process been? How's your head? Everyone freaks out because they see him shake his head. I don't know if people notice that during the playoffs, but it's just a thing he does. No, just say hi. Just tell him we're rooting for him. Okay, that's all I need.
Okay, done. Done and done.
All right, before we continue on, going through some more combine potential risers, let's go talk to our friends over at Bud Light.
Hey, you're not actually allowed to drink in a beer commercial?
Since when?
You gotta wait till it's done. Oh,
5,
4, 3, 2, 1.
Continuing on with our combine talk here, Thor Nystrom with us. And again, if you are not following him, you need to be following, have the notifications on at ThorKU over there on Twitter, on X. But let's go over through some wide receivers who you think stocks could rise depending on how they do over there in Indianapolis this weekend. Starting with wide receiver, let's go Jalen Royals first out of Utah State. That's someone that, you know, through our conversations always, Thor, has been somewhat to you as he needs development, right? He is going to be a bit more of a project, but what do you think that he could bring this weekend?
Well, one big thing is the medicals with his foot. Now, Jalen Royals, so he's knocked out for the season in October with a foot injury. He had the fabulous 2023, and he was destroying the Mountain West up until he got knocked out for the season with that foot injury. Now, Jalen Royals got to talk to him down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. He confirmed that he was not 100% on the field there, which to me contextually made his performance at the Senior Bowl, Jalen Royals, even more impressive. He was not 100%. He told us that he thought he was going to be 100% by the NFL Combine. So will he be, right? Will he be for the medicals and get a clean bill of health with that? And then as far as the testing goes, because that's one of the other questions with Jalen Royals. What is the speed there? What is the agility there? We all love his tape, right? Like for the year and a half between the start of 2023 and then October of 2024, he was one of the best wide receivers in college football. But we would love to get the full gamut of athletic tests from Jalen Royals and just make sure that he's above the threshold with all that different stuff. So hopefully he is 100% and the medicals check out and we get to see Jalen Royals out there doing his thing.
Yeah, and it just feels like for him too, he manages always, Thor, it looks like, to play much bigger than his size. And I think, you know, that could be something else where when you look at him physically, you don't say, oh, wow, this is the guy. He's amazing. When you look at his routes, it's not something that blows you away either, but it's just, you know, that he has the athleticism and the talent. And so if he's able to kind of showcase that and show that off, feels like it could be, you know, a good time for him over there this weekend. That's the one thing. He just plays much bigger than he is.
Yeah, Royal. Now he's short, right? Like, and that's the thing. He's a bit beneath. You know, he's 5'11", close to 5'11 and a half, but he is jacked. Jalen Royals, 210 pounds. So it's a bit. You know, it was sort of like Jaden Reed a couple years ago, you know, where it's like the shorter receiver, but just super duper well built. He has the release package. He gets off the line no matter what. You have the footwork with both those guys. And then you had the strength, right, to get through some of the hand fighting stuff. So they get to start out their routes when they want and in what direction they want, right? They're not getting funneled one way or the other by the cornerback. So you sort of have similar stuff with that. I like, to your point, the athleticism. I seen it on the field. You even got to see it when he wasn't 100% at the Senior Bowl. But just where is that high-end speed? Where is the acceleration? Curious about the 10-yard split. And then those agility scores as well. So I hope that Jalen Royals is okay to test.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Let's say, you know, worst case scenario that he's not. Do you think he did enough on tape and has enough tape where teams can like kind of look through that and say, all right, we're going to not necessarily take a flyer or take a chance, but we know that, you know, he could be someone that could stretch the field and help us out here. Do you think he's done enough for that?
For me, he has to get into day 2. Yes. Okay. You know, I don't know if the NFL would if he skipped or if he was medically ruled out the rest of the process, which is not happening. But like if that were the case and the NFL just had to go off what they had before, it's possible that he could fall into round 4. But the thing is, this isn't a very good receiver class. And Jalen Royals has showed legit chops out on the field. Right? Yeah. Like where it's not theoretical. We have, and sure, it was the Mountain West, but Utah State did play a couple good teams. He has seen a couple NFL corners. It is extremely difficult to stop Jalen Royals. So he is on the sort of short list of guys where it's like you get the checkbox on their film. And now we just want to see this other stuff. But yeah, he can punch his ticket, no doubt about it, into round 2 with even a decent combine showing. And round 2, we just said day 2, round 2, you can get up to if you test well. So that's what's on the line for Jalen Royals. He told us down at Mobile at the Senior Bowl that he wanted to be out there in front of the NFL. This is a kid that was overlooked his whole life. He was a dual sport guy. out of Georgia, but he didn't have any offers coming out of high school. So he had to go to Georgia Military Institute coming out of high school, right? And then he transferred to Utah State. Nobody had ever heard of him before. And then you had the breakout starting in 2023. This is a guy that wants to prove himself. If he is able to test, if he has not been ruled out, he will be out there. So that's what I'm expecting, and we'll see where the chips fall after that.
Oh, I like that one. All right, let's go to another receiver here who you think stocks could rise depending on how he does this weekend. But it is Savion Williams, wide receiver out of TCU. I mean, when you look at someone that developed into a super great weapon this past season, you see 60 receptions, 611 yards, 6 touchdowns. What's he bringing to Indianapolis?
This is going to be a classic box score scout against the film scout guy, because you look at the surface from the treetops. It's what you're mentioning. It's like, man, This guy broke out as a receiver this year. He had all these carries, the 332 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns. He even completed three. He was 3 for 3 passing on trick plays. He was a high school quarterback. And then you see 6'5", 225 pounds. You know that he has run 22.5 miles per hour on the GPS on the field. This is an insane athlete. So you just see it from the treetops and you're like, man, why is he not a first round pick? He has all the athleticism in the world. He broke out, multi-versatile skill set, all this different stuff. I'll tell you why. It's because the guy can't run routes, and it's like he catches balls with his elbows sometimes. He had 8 drops this past year, even though they changed his usage to be like Laviska Shenault or Rondale Moore his last year, at Purdue, where it was just the manufactured touch stuff close. They tried to have Savion Williams act as a traditional boundary receiver his first 2 years as a starter. 2022, 2023, he had ADOTs over 10 both those years. Savion Williams, he didn't get any separation. The PFF stats on this, one of the years he had a 31st percentile separation rate. The other one was in the mid 50s or low 50s. But again, not great at the route running, and then the ball skills are all over the place. He 8 drops this year, 5 of them were within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage. So like that's the issue with Savion Williams. Is he anything more than a mashup of Cordero Patterson and Laviska Shenault? I don't think so. I think that you are getting a utility man in your offense where you can shift them around, you can do the end around stuff, and you can manufacture his catches close to the line. I don't think you're getting more than that. But I think after he tests, people are going to absolutely lose their mind and his stock is going to go up. I just want the audience to keep that context in mind.
All right, because I hear dual threat weapon. I hear he added 322 rushing yards, six touchdowns on the ground, and I think Deebo Samuel. Is that not something where I know that's a high praise, but is that not where you could see him be used in the NFL, or not really?
Deebo Samuel can run routes, and he has workable hands. Like, right. So like that's the issue there, right? Like they tried for multiple years. TCU, one of those years, I was 2022 when they made the national title. I mean, they wanted to trust Savion Williams, again, in a more traditional role. You just, from the treetops, it looks like this is an alpha boundary wide receiver one, and TCU, they couldn't have used anything more after Quentin Johnson walked out the door. They wanted Savion Williams to be their next Quentin Johnson. Now, people out there I know are yelling, well, Quentin Johnson's hands stink too. Yes, but at least he can make plays down the field. And at least he could do the slant thing for you as well to keep you off of it. So you got those explosive plays with him. Savion Williams, I don't know that you trust him in the NFL beyond 10 yards from the line of scrimmage, honestly.
Where do you have him again ranked for your wide receivers coming into the draft?
Right now, I have him now far from finalized, but I have Savion Williams, wide receiver 13 right now. Okay. The media consensus board, he is wide receiver 8.
Okay. So it's good. That's exactly why we're talking about him right now, because these are guys where you go into the combine and you have a lot to lose too, but you also can, drastically increase your draft stock too. But there's the other side of it too, Thor, where we say, okay, yeah, they can go one of two ways. And some of these guys, it might not end up how we want it to, where they just kind of go out there and don't perform up to the level that we expected them to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're gonna get it both ways. We do every year,
Yeah.
right? The guy that surprises with the testing or the guy that disappoints with it. And then the stock is gonna go up and down. And then we sort of restack the deck coming out of Indianapolis to set it up for the stretch run, which is pro day, pro day, pro day, pro day, pro day, right? Where that is your last shot to, if you didn't do well at the combine to try to replace some of the bad numbers with the good ones. But if you go out and ace the test at the combine, your pre-draft process is closed over because you don't need to test again.
Amazing. Well, let's go over through another tight end that we've been talking about a lot this offseason. That is Harold Fannin, tight end out of Bowling Green. I know you talked about him during the Senior Bowl as well, but 100 catch season, 117 catches, 1,555 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. Expectations for him in Indianapolis?
I would say reasonably high. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
Harold Fannin shattered every receiving record that we have in the FBS for single season tight end play last year. That's the season that he's coming off of. At the Senior Bowl, there were some people grumbling early on that he didn't appear to be moving as well as they had hoped. This is a guy who came in, he measured 6'3", 238 into the Senior Bowl. So we know he's not playing any inline in the NFL. He has to be the slot guy, and then he has to be the movable piece around. And it's like, this guy has to be a pretty good athlete for that, right? Like, you're replacing a wide receiver on the field at that point when you're out there. You have to be an Evan Ingram type or something like that, or a Kincaid or IJ Likely, et cetera, et cetera. But when we got the GPS data back from the zebra tracking system that the Senior Bowl has down there in Mobile, what we found was Harold Fannin had the fourth fastest max speed of any tight end that they had measured at the event, going back to the inception of the zebra system, which is in 2018. Going beyond that, we also got deceleration and acceleration and a couple other cool numbers that the zebra system does. Travis May of A to Z Sports, he has a metric where he combined all the athleticism metrics and then looked at them over all the classes going back to 2018 since we've had the data. Harold Fannin scored the highest in that system of the on-field athleticism at the Senior Bowl of any tight end ever. Since 2018. So again, that's just on-field athleticism. And I did ask Travis, it's not size adjusted. So I mean, there's a contextual thing there because Fannin is on the lighter side. But the whole point being, I think Fannin is more athletic than people think. And we have data on this that's only a month old, right? Up to date. So I think Fannin's going to go out there. I think he's going to test better than people think. And if he does, coming off the season he did, where his tape speaks for itself, certainly you punch your ticket into day two. And then the question becomes, can you get into round two? Or are you going to get pushed back there to round three? But we have precedent for this type of player going in round two. It's happened multiple times. Irv Smith is a guy that, that's who Harold Fannin is. But what people thought Irv Smith went in the second round. So I think if Harold Fannin tests really well, I do believe that he will get into the second round.
And it feels like if he impresses like as a pass catcher in some of these workouts too, like you could see him go to a team where they say, well, we want to get a little bit creative with you. We want to get creative on how we open up the playbook for you because like you said, of his tracking skills, his hands and everything like that. So it feels like that's where the bread and butter could be this weekend.
Well, hopefully he goes to a creative team. Yes, because that's what you need there, right? Like, I don't want to just stick him in, certainly not stick him in inline. I don't think any coach is dumb enough to do that in the NFL. But like beyond the slot stuff, Harold Fannin is a multifaceted, multi-talented player that you get the utility out of by moving him around. He's you want to get him isolated against, the slow-footed strong safety, right? Or the lumbering middle linebacker, right? Like that's what you're trying to do. And when you can get him matched up on that, he's going to lick the guy, right? So if your offense is looking for sort of an ancillary piece where you can shift them around, you can get the defense to tip off to you before the snap, whether they are in man or zone, and you can potentially get them isolated on a bad coverage guy if you are in man. That's what Harold Fannin brings. And if he gets the spacing and he's in a situation like that, he's going to put up numbers. The last point I'll make about this, I always get interested when the teams, they go like a crazy extra mile to manufacture touches for a guy. It's what we saw with Brock Bowers at Georgia. It's what we saw this year with Tyler Warren, the consensus tight end 1 in this class. Bowling Green did that for Harold Fannin a lot. The shifting into the backfield, he'd be a lead blocker. They would also hand him the ball as well. You're looking at the G5's version of Brock Bowers. Now, how will Harold Fannin test? Again, that is going to inform we're on that little band of outcomes that he ends up falling. But I think round 2, all you got to do to get there is test really well. And I think he's got a shot.
I'm excited for these tight ends, Thor. I know that we're talking about everyone, but this weekend especially, like, because you've said like how deep this class could be with, you just mentioned Tyler Warren, you've mentioned Loveland, we've just talked Harold Fannin. I remember us going through Elijah Arroyo. Like there are just some guys there that really, I think, could make a huge difference. Those ones are going to be fun.
There's like 7, 8 or so that like fantasy players need to be keeping a very close eye on. This class, it's not as good at quarterback and wide receiver, but running back and tight end are running back potentially historic. But this tight end class is up over some of the ones we've seen.
Love to hear it for fantasy football players for sure. Let's go through now some non-skill position players and see, how you think that they could help their draft stock going into this weekend. Let's start with the offensive lineman Armand Membou out of Missouri. What have you seen from him and what could you expect to see this weekend?
Yeah, multi-year starter in the SEC, 6'3", 314 pounds, was at right tackle, and he was dominant there in the SEC last year, 90.4 PFF grade. The question coming into the process, are his arms long enough to hang at tackle in the NFL? And then what would his testing be? Does, in terms of the agility and in terms of the straight ahead stuff, he has answered the question of the arm length, and then he did it on the field as well at the Senior Bowl, but 81 wingspan at the Senior Bowl, which is above average for all tackle prospects, not 6'3" tackle prospects, all tackle prospects across the ocean of data that we've had of guys coming in the last 20 years. He moves well on the field, Embo. He moves really well. Will we see that in the testing? That's the last question here, right? Like the teams are still between, should he kick inside to guard, where that height, you traditionally just get kicked inside to guard, but you have this other stuff. The other thing I haven't mentioned, that kid is still 20 years old. So when you talk about the dominant season that he is coming off of in the SEC, the highest level of college football that we had, he's only 20 years old. You start to dream on the potential a bit, and you can make scouts and evaluators dream even more if you go out and dominate athletic testing.
Is there a test specifically that you're more not excited to look at for him, but that will show us more for his skill set this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, for offensive tackles in general, one thing that's big for me is the speed score, which gives you the context of the 40 with their size. It's something that the data has shown has predictive value for offensive linemen. So it'll be interesting to see where he runs. He's going to be around the 315 pounds. The other couple for offensive tackles that I juice a little bit more in my system, because the data has borne this out, is the broad jump. And that makes a bit of sense, right? That's the explosion coming off the snap, right? So it's, same sort of a deal. And then the last one to get a little bit of agility in there is the shuttle, is something as well that has shown to be a little bit, but that's the last one. Those two ones where it is directly measuring your straight ahead explosion and with the context of your size, that is shown to be most predictive of offensive tackle, the translation to the NFL.
Great. Let's go over to defensive lineman here, Shemar Stewart out of Texas A&M. What are your expectations? What do you need to see from him at the Combine this weekend?
This guy's a paradox. Whenever I start thinking about Shemar Stewart, his evaluation, I turn into Matthew McConaughey from True Detective. Just start talking wistfully and, crushing pop cans and stuff. Shemar Stewart, last year, he finished 15th in the FBS with 33 hurries. And yet, over his entire 37-game career, he only had 4.5 sacks. It doesn't make any sense when you consider the pressure numbers and the hurry numbers over the years, and if you consider the physical package. 6'5", 281 pounds, confirmed in Mobile. His wingspan is nearly 7 feet, confirmed in Mobile, and he is expected to run in the 4.5s with ludicrous jumps and the agility stuff as well. This is a freak of an athlete. When he came out, he was a 5-star recruit. And we will see that in Indianapolis. This was a stock up guy his first couple of days at the Senior Bowl. Then he opted out of the event. Heading into Thursday, he had shown enough there. This is Stewart, the last sort of stop on the rodeo there to prove to the NFL. Not only do I deserve to go in round 1, but I'm a potential top 15 or certainly top 20 pick. I think he will get there, assuming that he tests as well as we think he will.
This seems like one of the biggest boomer bust prospects this week, right? Of guys, Thor, that could creep into round 1. It feels like that's him, potentially.
Yeah. But I mean, he can't, so this goes back to what is the value of the combine testing? Well, it's not in a vacuum. It is against our expectation heading in, right? And Stewart, we got pretty high expectations, right? Which he could even exceed. And if he does that, I think that's where you're talking the top 20. If he hits them, I think you punch your ticket into the first round. Where is it? We don't know. But if he can't even test as a bit above average athlete, because then his stock will crater, right? Because then you got two big issues. You only had the 4.5 sacks, which scouts will give you the benefit of the doubt and fill that part of your evaluation in for you, as long as you were good in the Senior Bowl, which he was, as long as you have the pressure numbers, which he does, as long as you have the physical package, which he does, and as long as you test well, which we're about to see. If he doesn't test well, then all of a sudden, you know what I mean? He has to test like we think he will. But assuming he does, like I said, you will be hearing your name on the last Thursday night of April.
Boomer bust. That's the one. That's one I'm excited to watch for sure. Let's go over to edge James Pearce out of Tennessee. What does he need to do this weekend for his stock to rise a little bit?
For James Pearce, this one is going in the interview rooms. There has been some chatter about James Pearce and how hard did he work, et cetera, and work within the team system and different stuff like this. I'm not going to talk more about that because this is from other media members. I do not have that information. So, I mean, but we started to hear some chatter about this, didn't see Pearce so far yet during the pre-draft process. So it's going to be interesting to get to talk to him at the Senior Bowl. He is going to face some pointed questions from teams, it would appear, if that intel is correct. And also from at the podium session. On the field, that kid is a doppelganger for Brian Burns, who came out of Florida State, several years ago. It's the exact same thing. Yeah, right? You're tall, you are very skinny, and you are ludicrously explosive off the edge. Will that guy ever be an edge setter against the run? I don't think so, and I don't really care. He can generate ridiculous heat on the quarterback. He is just going to have to answer some questions and make teams comfortable in the interview process.
I'm glad you brought up the interview process as well, because we've been talking about all the skills that they need to go through, but interviews are just as important here, Thor, over the weekend. Especially, you're always going to hear chatter about bad ones, what didn't do well in the interview process, all this stuff, but it does make a huge difference.
Yes, it does. Yeah. And this will, this will poison the well for some teams. There was a kid several years ago who had this travesty of interviews, and he ended up getting taken, I think, at day 2 anyway, but he was released really, really quickly. The teams, they care about the interview thing, and some care about it of the paramount importance, like the old school evaluators, the Dave Gettlemans, the Rick Spielmans. And Rick Spielman, hey, welcome back, Rick, you're back in the game. They love to sit across from someone in Indianapolis and then do the thing of when I looked into that kid's eye, I believe that I could hand the keys of the franchise over to him. So fans, we don't get access to that, until after the fact. Some of them will put out the little clips or whatever, but it's something that is extremely important, that is a bit of a black box for us publicly.
Next up, let's go to Jihaad Campbell out of Alabama. What have you seen from him in the past, and what do you think he could bring to Lucas Oil Stadium this weekend?
Well, this is a guy that played off-ball linebacker mostly the past couple of years, his 2 years starting at Alabama, although they did shift him to the edge a bit to rush the passer. He had 1,093 snaps as the off-ball linebacker. He had 155 snaps rushing off the edge the last 2 years. Campbell came into college viewed by recruiting services as a 3-4 edge rushing outside linebacker. But again, he was able to learn the off-ball thing while getting some work in on the edge. I can report that Jihaad Campbell, during the pre-draft process, has been training almost exclusively as an edge rusher, not an off-ball linebacker, down at his training facility. So Jihaad Campbell, I think that one thing that he wants to show during the we talk about the test and talk about the interview, talk about the medicals. The other thing is when you're down on the field doing the drills, the NFL cares a bit more about that than the general public, and some more than others. I interviewed John Randall last weekend, and he said that he thought the most important drill or test for defensive linemen, it was the fluidity going around the bags. He said you can always tell who should be the 3 technique, where if they don't have to slow down when they're weaving in and out. And he said, the guys that are going to be eating French fries and stopping the run the rest of their life, or out of the NFL quick, by the guys that have to stop with that. The Jihaad Campbell wants to go out there in some of those drills and show that he can bend the edge. I was the edge rusher coming out. Do not pigeonhole me as a traditional off-ball linebacker. We have other sort of hybrid players in this class. Jalen Walker, his rival at Georgia, is another guy like that. Jihaad Campbell's a little bit bigger than that, right? And so, I think he could make the argument, I could be sort of a 50-50 situational usage guy, rush me off the edge, be the off-ball guy. And one thing to Jihaad credits, eternal credit, by the way, when he goes into college, in high school, he was a wide receiver and he was a defensive end. And then again, he was going to be the edge rusher at Alabama. But the off ball, it requires more coverage work. Jihaad Campbell was very, very good in coverage the last couple of years. This is starting to look like a guy who is well-rounded all the way around the board. You can send him after the quarterback. You can put him out in coverage, and he will disrupt passing lanes and get in the way. He is a sideline-to-sideline run defender as well. You go out there and you test like people think you should. Again, high school receiver, was a 5-star recruit. Then that's where expected to run in the 4.4s at the combine. You do that, you're going to go very high, probably in the top half of the first round.
Yeah, that feels like a guy that could get, like, the buzz could just keep getting louder, especially when you look at him. He's like, he's got the freak size speed kind of guys going into this weekend as well. So that'll be a fun one to watch no matter what. Let's talk about cornerback Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky. Kind of same question, Thor. When you look at him and what he has put on tape so far, what do you want to see from him this weekend?
Maxwell Hairston, I think, is being slept on right now, and I think that that's about to end. People aren't talking about Maxwell Hairston, with regards to the combine, and you'll see some of these columns of like, oh, who's gonna, impress and all this different stuff. I haven't seen Maxwell Hairston's name too much. You heard it here first. Maxwell Hairston, I believe, will be in contention to be the fastest player in Indianapolis. I think he is going to be on that short list, and I think he has a shot to be the fastest player in Indianapolis. He has been running consistently in the 4.2s. I'm hearing during his pre-draft training. So this is a guy I think is going to open some big-time eyes. He's on the smaller side, but he has already measured in as far as the wingspan and the arm length, which are both solidly above threshold and above average. So he has the length to stick outside. He has the footwork to stay outside. He has the coverage chops to stay outside. And he has all the speed in the world, and he is about to prove it in Indianapolis. So this is an early look at a guy who will be a riser coming out of this week.
The last one that we have to wrap up on of a guy that stock could rise or fall during the combine this weekend is safety Nick Emmanwori. I was practicing that, and I almost got it. Emmanwori, what have you seen from him?
Nick, let's close this thing down with the freak, Kendall. And this guy is a certified freak. 6'3", 220 pounds, expected to run in the 4.3s in Indianapolis. And Bruce Feldman reported that last offseason, Emmanwori broad jumped 11.4 and his vertical 42 inches. If that kid tests like that at 6'3" and 220 pounds, oh boy, Malachi Starks, your days at safety one might be over. Like that's what we're talking about. Emmanwori, he has been, back half of the first round, some mocks right outside the first round, sort of in that sort of bucket there. If he goes out and tests like that, this is a guy last year that was a first team All-American, right? He had the havoc numbers, he had the interception numbers, the pass deflection numbers, everything like that. He goes out and tests like that in that physical package. The stock is going to be skyrocketing.
All right, Thor. So we know you're going to be out there, boots on the ground, just like you were for the Senior Bowl here. But it doesn't have to be a guy that we just talked about, or it could be. I want to know your player that you're the most excited to watch this weekend.
The most excited to watch, I'll say my boy Kaleb Johnson running that 40.
Okay. Oh, I like it. I like it. And then what are we doing? Waffle House? I mean, what are we doing in Indy? I know Waffle House was the thing a couple weeks ago. So what can we expect there?
Yeah, I mean,
what are we doing?
Down there in Alabama, but in Indianapolis, it is St. Elmo's. St. Elmo's where everybody goes. You get the shrimp cocktail. You know, if you have any sinus issues, that shrimp cocktail with the horseradish will help clear it up for you.
Amazing. Well, as always, Thor, you are great. I'm so excited to, just be watching you guys down there and getting all of your updates again. Everyone has to go and give you a follow at ThorKU on Twitter, on X. Make sure you have, honestly, you're the best with notifications on. So make sure you guys are doing that this weekend. Again, all the articles, everything is going to be live at fantasylife.com. All those articles 100% free. Same with our newsletter. While you're there, make sure you go and subscribe to that. Thor, have fun this weekend. I can't wait for all the recaps we do.
Appreciate it. I'll say hi to Skattebo for you, Kendall.
Yes, there we go. Thanks, everyone.